morning, Junior Church. Here we are again. I hope you're all safe and well and that you're helping look after Mum and Dad and everybody else in your house. We are going to carry on this week thinking about what happened after Jesus was risen. So we learnt about Palm Sunday when he entered Jerusalem, and then the crucifixion, and then he rose again. Last week we talked about the marks in his hands, and we drew them, if you remember, as hearts to remind us that the marks were there because he died for us, because he loves us. Now this week we're going to look at this story, the road to Emmaus. Okay, so let's have a look at this and find out what happened next. So 2 of Jesus's followers were walking down the road towards a village called Emmaus. It was about 7 miles outside of Jerusalem. Okay, now you might not be able to see their faces close up here, but they look a bit miserable. They don't look very happy at all. And it says that while they were walking, they were talking about everything that had happened in the last few days, because they'd seen Jesus, they knew Jesus, they'd probably eaten with him and talked with him and moved around with him, and then he was gone. Then the tomb was empty. So they're probably a little bit confused by all of this. Now they were talking about Jesus sharing the Last Supper at Passover and how he'd been arrested and crucified. And it said that they were bewildered. That's a nice word for confused. I like that. They were bewildered. They couldn't understand what had happened. How was this tomb empty? How had his body just disappeared from the tomb? And then somebody else joined them on their walk. So you can see now there's 3 of them. Can you think about who this might be? So this man here joins them and they start having a chat. Excuse me. And they didn't recognise him. They didn't know who he was. But he said to them, "What are you discussing?" So you know when we meet up with friends and somebody's already talking and you join in the conversation, don't you? And that's what happened here. So he wants to know what they were talking about. They looked very miserable. They do, actually, don't they? The other one is scratching his head. He's still bewildered. He doesn't understand what's happening. And he says, "Are you the only man visiting Jerusalem who doesn't know what's happened in the last few days? Where have you been? How do you not know what's happened to Jesus in the last few days?" Of course, that's what we're talking about. And then Jesus, because that's who this man is, if you hadn't already guessed, he says to them, "What things have happened?" Now he already knows, obviously, but he wants to hear them because he wants them to tell him why they're worried or what they're confused about. So they explained it was about Jesus of Nazareth, that he was a prophet and he was powerful in what he said and did, and that the chief priests and the rulers handed him over for execution and he was crucified. And we had hoped he would restore Israel and that he would rise on the 3rd day. But the tomb was empty. We don't know what's happened. We're confused, basically. So they talked about the crucifixion, and then they said that the women amazed us. They went to the tomb. They said that his body had gone. Angels had told them not to fear, and that Jesus was alive. But they didn't see him anywhere. So these 2 men have got no idea where he is. And then Jesus said to them, "How foolish. How foolish you've been. How slow to believe everything the prophets have said. The Saviour had to suffer all that he has so that people could see his glory." So it had to happen. Okay, and we found out, didn't we, last week, and in the Easter story, actually, that we knew that this would happen because it tells us in the Old Testament in the Bible. So he then went on to tell the 2 men everything that the prophets had said would happen involving himself. Now when they reached the village, Jesus wanted to continue with his journey, but the 2 men convinced him to stay. And later, when they were about to eat, Jesus took the bread and broke it, and that is when they realised who he was. So then, all of a sudden, they recognised him. And at that point, he disappeared from their sight. So it was like he's appeared to them. When they realised who he was, then he disappeared again. And then they said, "It's true. Did our hearts not burn within us? Why didn't we know what the scriptures meant? Why didn't we believe him when he said that he would rise again?" But they realised that meeting with Jesus, talking with him and walking with him had affected them. Now, look at their faces here. Remember when I said at the beginning they looked miserable? Look at the difference. So here we've got two men that look a lot happier. They look more peaceful. They don't look worried or concerned about anything. And you can see that meeting Jesus changed them. So at the start of the journey they looked worried, they were bewildered, that lovely word, very confused, and then all of a sudden they look quite happy and at peace. So some things to remember, to take away this week. Number one, even when we don't understand what's happening to us, Jesus always does. He's in control, so we should rest and not worry at all. We don't need to worry about anything. He's in control. Even when we don't know what's happening and we're bewildered by our situation, he knows. Number two, always look for Jesus, because when we think he's not there, he is. These men had walked 7 miles with him to Jerusalem, or just outside of Jerusalem. They'd walked to Emmaus, hadn't they? And they didn't realise he was with them. But he's always there, so always be on the lookout. He's always there. And walking with Jesus, that means living as his disciples, not having a stroll up and down the road with him, but walking with him, living as his disciple and taking him into every situation with us, helps us and changes us. So the more we get to know him by reading and praying, the more that will change us. So it changes our hearts, it changes how we feel, it changes how we think, and you will be able to see it from the outside, just as you could with these two men. Okay, so there's your 3 things to remember this week. Walking with Jesus, always walk with Jesus, and remember these 3 things. Okay, it will change you. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.